What does it really mean to leave home? To willingly abandon the people who raised you, the memories that shaped you, and the comfort of knowing exactly who you are. Not because you have to, but because something beyond the horizon just calls to you. Every great adventure begins with the same impossible choice: to leave behind the person you are, in pursuit of the person you might become. It's why Homer's Odyssey has endured for nearly thousands of years. Not because every great adventure story since has copied it, but because they inherited something from it. Frodo leaving the Shire, Luffy setting sail in search of the One Piece, Gon leaving Whale Island to find a father he's never truly known. They're all built on the same question: what kind of person do you become when you choose the unknown over the life you leave behind? And that's why Christopher Nolan's adaptation of the Odyssey fascinated me, because it made me wonder why so many people, myself included, walked away from this film feeling strangely disconnected. So what is it that stories like The Lord of the Rings, One Piece, and Hunter x Hunter understand about adventure, that the very story they all inherited from lost in its modern adaptation? And if you feel like you might get lost on the adventure I'm gonna take you on, consider subscribing to the channel and I'll guide you along the way. Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey should have been the defining adventure film of our generation. It had everything a filmmaker could ask for: a budget of $250 million, breathtaking practical effects, real locations, a star-studded cast, and adapting one of the greatest adventure stories ever written. And best of all, we got Travis Scott. Yet after I watched it, one thing rang out in my head: it looks incredible, but somehow it feels hollow. And initially I really couldn't understand why, but I think I found my answer, and it begins with understanding what the Odyssey actually is. At its core, it isn't a story about defeating monsters or surviving impossible odds. It's a story about coming home. Every island Odysseus visits isn't simply another obstacle to overcome, it's another test of his character. Every step of the journey asks the same question: what kind of person will you become before you finally make it home? The adventure isn't defined by the places Odysseus visits, but by how those places transform him. And that's where I think Nolan's adaptation quietly loses what made Homer's story timeless. Christopher Nolan always pursued realism. He wants every location to be tangible, every set to be practical, and every moment to feel grounded in reality. That's why he pushed for using animatronics over using CGI. But the issue is, the Odyssey isn't a story that asks to be grounded. It's myth, it's legend. It's a story meant to make us feel like the world stretches far beyond the horizon. And so the result is a film that feels strangely distant. We watch Matt Damon playing Odysseus endure impossible trials, but we rarely feel like we're enduring them alongside him. Because he remains emotionally reserved, it makes it difficult to fully understand not just what he's fighting against, but what he's fighting for. And that's why I kept coming back to one image while watching the film. The Odyssey feels like a beautiful wedding cake, made entirely out of cardboard. From the outside, it's magnificent, carefully crafted, technically impressive, almost flawless in its construction. But beneath the surface, there's very little emotional substance holding it together. It lacks depth of flavor, it's bland, and something you will only digest once. And the strange thing is, in the past, Hollywood had already proved they know how to craft a well-composed adventure story. And all we need to look at is Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings trilogy, which capture the very feeling that Christopher Nolan's Odyssey struggles to recreate. It's not only that the visuals were legendary for its time, or because Middle-earth just looks stunningly beautiful. It was because Jackson understood that adventure isn't about moving the characters from one spectacular location to the next. It's about creating an emotional attachment between the audience, the characters, and the world they're exploring. Middle-earth feels ancient, it feels lived in. Frodo is tiny, yet courageous and lovable. Bringing a different meaning to size doesn't matter. And it's what made the Lord of the Rings trilogy such a defining adventure. It created this beautiful bond between Sam and Frodo that made us want to root for them the entire time. It made us think the entire world was alive. And most importantly, it showed us a world that we wanted to see saved. And the irony is, while Christopher Nolan's adaptation of the Odyssey struggled to make us believe there's something worth discovering beyond the horizon, then we have Hunter x Hunter and One Piece, which do the exact opposite. Now in Hunter x Hunter, before Gon ever even meets his father, the series asks a far more interesting question. Why would someone abandon their own son just to keep exploring? At first, Gene's actions seem impossible to understand. I mean, he's a father who abandoned his child because this man wanted to keep chasing adventure and exploring the world, placing his own curiosity over the responsibility of raising a son. And let's be honest, that's incredibly selfish. There's a reason he's in the top top 10 for worst fathers in all of anime. But Hunter x Hunter isn't interested in giving us a simple answer, and even Gon gives his father a lot of benefit of the doubt, because in his mind he rationalizes that if his dad abandoned him for adventure, there must have been a good reason. It must mean that being a hunter is that grand of a job, and the world is that worth exploring over raising a family. And that's why every new place that Gon visits, and every hunter he meets, and every impossible challenge he overcomes makes us understand Jin's decision a little more, really highlighting what it means to put your life on the line in the name of adventure, where it's exhilarating, it's pure ecstasy, and we understand why Gin is so addicted to being a hunter. Hunters devote their lives to discovering things nobody else has ever seen, and adventure isn't treated as the means to an end. It becomes the purpose of life itself, and nowhere is this philosophy explored more clearly than through Gon, because what begins as a simple journey to find his father transforms in a journey to understand him. Gon doesn't simply inherit Jin's curiosity, he becomes consumed by it. And ironically, the same world Jin loves exploring is the same one that slowly strips away Gon's innocence. And we also see the impact of what happens to Gon growing up without an active father figure in his life. It becomes an incubator for some of his darkest emotions. But even the hunter world itself reflects this idea, because long after Gon finally meets Jin, we then learn how small the known world actually is, with the introduction of the Dark Continent, which completely reframes the series. And the large world that Gon lives in suddenly feels insignificant, that there'll always be something greater waiting to be explored, and that adventure never truly ends. Posing another interesting question, which is how much humanity will push themselves and sacrifice in the process in the name of exploring the unknown. And while we have Hunter x Hunter that on its surface explores adventure through curiosity, we then have One Piece which teaches us why we continue chasing it, exploring it through pure, unadulterated freedom. Now, from the very first chapter, Luffy doesn't dream of becoming the king of the pirates because he wants power, wealth, or fame. He just wants to become the freest person in the world. Becoming the pirate king isn't the destination, it's simply the proof that nobody can tell him where he can and can't go. And adventure for Luffy is a purest expression of freedom. And that's exactly why One Piece feels so alive, even though it's an incredibly fictional world. Every island functions almost like its own myth. Alabasta explores tyranny and revolution. Skypiea questions what separates gods from ordinary people. Water 7 questions identity and belonging. Dressrosa examines inherited trauma and forgotten history. Every destination introduces not just a new location, but a completely new culture, political system, mythology, and a way of seeing the world. Oda doesn't simply invent islands, he builds civilization. His inspirations stretch across the entire globe, drawing from real history, architecture, mythology, and religion before transforming them into something uniquely his own. We have Elbaf, for example, which borrows heavily from Norse mythology. Skypiea echoes Mesoamerican civilizations and religious symbolism. Wano is inspired by feudal Japan. Fishman Island explores discrimination and inherited hatred. Even the devil fruits themselves feel like modern myths, yet the concept is grounded in religious texts. Each one carries its own strange rules and possibilities that constantly reshape how the world functions. And that's why I think One Piece is the closest thing our generation has to a modern day Odyssey. Not because Luffy is another Odysseus, but because both stories understand the same fundamental truth. The greatest adventures aren't driven by destination, they're driven by the belief that whatever lies beyond the next horizon might change your life forever. Now, when I first started writing this video, I thought I was trying to understand why Christopher Nolan's Odyssey left me feeling strangely disconnected. But somewhere along the way, I realized this was never really about Christopher Nolan, and it was about the essence of adventure itself. Homer understood that the greatest adventure was never about defeating monsters, it was allowing the journey to transform you. Peter Jackson understood that audiences don't fall in love with battles, they fall in love with worlds. Togashi understood that curiosity can be so powerful, it changes who we are. And Eiichiro Oda understood something that might be the most important lesson of all. Adventure isn't about finding the end of the map, it's about believing there's always another one waiting to be drawn. And that's why I don't think One Piece is simply inspired by the Odyssey. I think it's a story that has carried Homer's idea of adventure further than any modern work I've ever experienced. 3,000 years ago, Homer asked readers to imagine what might exist beyond the edge of the known world. And today, Oda asks the exact same question, only now the horizon is a grand line. Because the greatest adventures were never about escaping home, they were about returning as someone the journey transformed, with everything coming back full circle.